If you were here for our 20th birthday service in March, you probably heard from Diane, as a matter of fact, that I wasn't really the first minister of this church. There was someone else who was supposed to come. They had been appointed as the first minister of this brand new congregation, but she didn't come. She got another job, I believe, in Tennessee. And so this new church, which had been recently recognized by the Unitarian Universalist Association at General Assembly in a great big ceremony, scrambled, wondering what they would do. A couple of the ministers at the Denver churches knew me, and one of them was here on my 20th birthday, my minister in my very first UU church, Stephen Papa. He knew me, and I was also known at First Unitarian by Jim and Nan Hobart, and somehow or another those three got together with this church's leadership and recommended me. At the time it was called, or still called, the Parker Unitarian Universalist Church, and so I came. Because several members of this church had gone to First Universalist, my home church, we agreed on a one-year trial period for both of our sakes before entering into that full 5-year contract. And in this way, we were able to get 6 years out of the Unitarian Universalist Association grant for new congregations, which I think I said that pretty well. And then I was called in my 6th year at this church, which is now called Prairie. In the first few years, in addition to changing the name, which would make it more open to people who live somewhere besides Parker, we also had our first move because our first school, for those few of you who remember, was embedded in a neighborhood off Arapahoe Road that you literally could not describe how to get to. I would say something along the lines, well, you kind of go up over this hill, you come down to a Y, and then you can go right or left, and people would be very confused. So we moved. That move was by choice, and most of our moves have been by choice. To be at a better location, to be at a better school, to feel more like this is our home. Over these years, I've worked with you on all of the nuts and bolts of church life, from those locations, the name, the funding, our policies. But my heart, as most of you know, is in our ministries and in our programming, which ultimately is who we are, how we do things, how we are together. That's what people want to become part of. That is how the church grows on every level, not just in membership. I hope you will always be the best of who you are and what you are becoming. And I hope that you will always remember to use the words of that beautiful covenant that was written by all of you to remind yourselves to stay together through thick and thin, to know that there's going to be disagreements and disappointments, but that we are reminded to keep on trying because this is worth it. It is worth the effort, all that we do together. So early on, we have a Chalice Lighter grant from the district to hire our first religious educator and a small grant to hire our first ever high school youth advisor. And our religious education program, like most of our ministries and operations, has grown and shrunk and grown and shrunk over the years. And for the past 2 years, as many of you know, we have been in a fallow interim time after our last educator left, leaving our program on the shrinking side. Through your visioning process, which I have had almost nothing to do with, you have committed, or recommitted, I believe, to rebuilding our religious education program and swinging it back toward vibrancy. That's important to me, and I think to most of you. My daughters grew up in this church. They were in those very first one-student classes with just them and a teacher, Sunday after Sunday. My oldest, Catherine, came of age as a 7th grader in our very first coming-of-age service, like the one we'll have next week, which included her as the youngest and a young man who was a senior in high school. A long strip of them here representing almost every age. Coming of age is traditionally for 8th graders and recognizes that move from childhood to youth when you go from middle school to high school. And when you are starting again, which will be about the 4th major reboot of Prairie's children and youth programming, remember there are no real rules, just the need to believe in our children and their futures and to give them the best you can muster. You also do it because, like in the movie Field of Dreams, if you build that program, they will come. Prairie's religious education programming has always been the starting point of the church, as important as Sunday worship. Both are needed to be fully a church. When I first started in August 1999, I told the first board I could not do worship without a pianist. We had a volunteer who could play maybe 2 hymns. In those first few years, we had our first pianist, someone named Jill Redding, a young woman from First Unitarian, who lived in the Capitol Hill area of Denver, so a bit of ways, who couldn't drive. And for almost 2 years, someone literally went to pick her up every Sunday morning and bring her back and forth to church. And then by the time she left us to move to California, she had a driver's license. I think that was our major contribution to her life. That is the kind of determination it took to start our music program, which really took wing about 10 to 12 years ago, when then member Sheldon Barrett did everything from sing, to play piano, to direct the choir, to put duets and triplets and all this stuff together. And believe me, he was hard to replace. But Eric, who has now been with us for about 6 years, has given us a beautiful and steady presence that has helped nurture our musicians, so that we now have Paul directing our choir, we have Molly leading the band, we have Dave Lubashevsky offering folk music, and we just have beautiful music all the time. And I still believe that you cannot have worship without music, and in my opinion, the more the better. It is the music, not the words. It is that song, "We'll be going down to the river to pray," that you are going to be humming as you water your gardens and take your walks and drive and get on the bus. The music will be with most of us forever, which is why it's also important, I believe, that our children hear it and learn it. This church has been experimenting with what it means to be a full community for many years. It began in earnest when Kristen Famula was our Director of Religious Education. She coined, and it's used across the country, the term full community education. And she developed justice programming for children and youth, especially over the summer. We believed that children and youth could fully participate in many of the church's activities and probably, Danica, do them better than adults at many times. It's hard to outwork Danica on Sunday mornings.
Yes.
Putting this place together. In our first few years, our high school youth group, which my daughter was in, and their parents volunteered at the Parker Task Force Food Bank on Saturday mornings for a year, which helped the food bank become open for the first time on Saturdays. For the past 3 years, we have been experimenting with having all ages in worship and a separate learning hour for different ages and groups, which now brings us regular adult programming instead of, for those of you who will remember, the sporadic program at various locations, hard to remember, at all kinds of times on whatever evening of the week. There are many ways to continue to experiment with this model, including offering, which we have tried, a separate playroom during worship for older children, or perhaps moving learning hour to the early hour, followed by worship, which is how it's done in traditional Christian churches. In addition to being inclusive and giving families the opportunity to worship, sing, and pray together, our leadership team also seriously asked, how does one learn to be Unitarian Universalist? And as in any other kind of religion, attending worship is the answer. Worship is part of education in any kind of religious community. How can we teach if we don't teach praying too? Breaking the particularly Unitarian Universalist culture of separating adults from children and youth has been difficult, grumbly for some, and only partly successful. As you dream about your future, I hope developing real attention to the education of our children and youth will continue to be a priority and not look like babysitting as it does in most, if not many, of our churches. One of the reasons I believe that we generally lose so many of our young people when they grow up, all they've ever known is being pushed aside over there, usually in a basement. I am proud, and I know that many of you are as well, at how many of our young adults who grew up in this church come back to visit us when they are home for the holidays or the summer, and perhaps we will continue to build more and more programming for that age group, 18 to 30, 30 to 35, because like anything else, if you focus on it, it can happen. You have some people here now that can help you with that. Prairie has always also been blessed by a group of people, sometimes small, and now much larger through intentional structuring, those that are dedicated to the care of others. If anyone is sick or in the hospital or if someone dies, the news spreads swiftly through the congregation, even faster than the internet. And I have always been grateful to those of you who think to call me at such times. Caring for the pastoral needs of a congregation is a minister's job and a church's job, whether we do it well or not. We usually do it well. And I have learned that sharing the caring ministry with our caring circle, the most amazing group of people, is the greatest way to build genuine love into the very fabric of our community. I know that today and tomorrow that many of you will reach out to Dave and Fran, who have cared for so many of you, to join them in their grieving. As a community, we also know at these times when one is suffering, how important the church is to us. We do not want to be alone, and we want gentle hands for the journey, as one of our readings says. Our Caring Circle is one of our few ministries that has not ping-ponged back and forth between shrinking and growing. It has always been strong and has served our members well, with very few exceptions over the years. We create this sense of caring in many ways, in worship through candles of community, which this church has generally always recognized as a form of prayer, even for those who don't believe in prayer. Many of our churches no longer have these joys and sorrows spoken by their own people because they can so easily be abused and disrupt the time of sacred space in worship. My dream is that caring continues to be woven into all the church's ministries, all those child slidings, sharing, storytellings, and check-ins at the beginning and ending of classes and meetings, and an active caring circle that lets people know what's going on and creates ways for anyone to participate in supporting someone else. This sense of caring also is part of our Thriving Justice team, which practice a model which is so beautiful of members sharing their own personal spiritual practices and personal stories of justice work out in the community as part of its regular meetings. They have a time of reflection, not just reaction, and they do reflect well. I have spoken before about the nature of building a church. Each person who comes must have at least some of their personal needs met, and I'm sorry, it will not ever be all. Caring, learning, worship, spirituality, inspiration, action. As these ministries and programs grow, individuals get to know one another, and hopefully they start to become friends. Friendship, having fun, really is important because real friends are people who can share our lives, and those relationships are reciprocal. That means that you receive as well as give, and someone gives and receives from you. Without creating cliques, the more friendships that develop here in working and learning together, the stronger the bonds will be for the whole church, growing our caring community, Literally, by having fun, you grow the caring community. The third level of church growth comes with having a mission, both within our walls and without. Meeting the needs of children, families, elders, those with mental health issues, those with ability needs, and those with a need for sanctuary because of their personal struggles is our internal caring mission. Growing this to include spiritual support groups and social groups is a dream of mine for Prairie. There have been many such groups over the years, and it would be a next step to have intention about starting new ones, parenting groups, all generations meals and potlucks, divorce, cancer, and grief groups, hiking groups, and on and on. Among others, we now have, I think it's called Silver Sneakers, a group of older gentlemen who watch movies together, the Prairie Stitchers, and our Living Well with Mental Health Issues group. Most of these groups were not formed by the minister, but by those of you who see a need and have a friend or two and want to see if others want to join in. That's all it takes. Our external mission, our justice work, has been the third level of the church's development, and it has really boomed in the last 3 or 4 years. It has been integrated in the life of the church through service Sundays and an active list of the many ways anyone can participate in different actions in our larger community. Its focus this year has been racial justice, mental health, and economic justice. Our activities are numerous, and I encourage anyone interested to join the Justice League at any time, including its meeting today. My dream is that one day Prairie is a center for justice activities of all kinds, a place where people come to learn about everything from climate change to immigration, a place that offers sanctuary to those who are in need in many, many ways, a place where people can come together for deep conversation across all cultural and identity divides, and a church in which many people leave the relative safety of this space to enter into the world with others who are seeking freedom, fairness, peace, or justice. In the Western world of Christian and Jewish faith, there is a divide between those who focus on the orthodoxy of their faith, what you must believe, and those who focus on their deeds and works, which is a product of their faith. Unitarian Universalism falls squarely on the side of works. You do not need to believe alike to love alike, as one of our martyrs said. You will know our love by our works, as James says in the New Testament. And so we will be heretic Samaritans that will always stop to help someone who has fallen by the roadside. We will not argue about beliefs. We will take action. That is my dream for our justice ministry. Those who become active at Prairie soon learn that our relatively small church has almost all the same needs, services, ministries, and activities of a large church. And the unsung heroes of this church are those who actively engage in stewardship, the care of this community, serving on our elected committees, the board, the Committee on Shared Ministry, and the Nominating Committee. It includes those of you who are on our membership team, those who run the auction, canvas, and fundraising, our core leadership team, our associates group, who's committed to 2 years of ministry, and all the committees and councils of our church. All of that is the stewardship of our church. It includes everyone who helps put our chairs away after the service and who brings a plate of veggies or a donut to fellowship. It feels like a hive of bees around here on Sunday mornings, buzzing, 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 working to bring this church to life. And I hope this spirit of togetherness continues to thrive, and that one day this church will indeed have a permanent home, or a more permanent home, a larger, prettier sanctuary. Don't look. We worked so hard to create this, and in my mind, that church has stained glass windows that are so tall and filled with rainbow colors. There will be offices and meeting rooms and classrooms with pretty rainbow colors to welcome every soul. There will one day be a homeless shelter, perhaps a food pantry, a place for community group gatherings ranging from AA to PFLAG to the Humanists. You will have a vibrant music program, and you will host concerts, art shows, and movies for the larger community. You will be a leader of our churches, in the larger metro area, you will be a place where peoples from other faiths will feel welcome and be able to have conversations across the religious divides. You will have a way for anyone to live out the fullness and richness of our Unitarian Universalist faith. It will be so. Amen. I admit, I hope you'll remember me every now and then. I will always remember you, and I will always love you.
You're going to come back to visit, right?
It's actually not allowed.
It's not allowed?
Special invitation upon special time, maybe. But
So we'll head down to Mexico.
There you go, that's
you'll have to find me.
I know people that can do that.
I know that's true. Anyway, it's been quite a journey, hasn't it? And I know that the dream will continue, and it's been wonderful to watch you this year keep it alive and keep thinking and growing together. It's just beautiful to see.